The flames licked at Zelda Norwood's skirts as she ran from the burning schoolhouse, her lungs searing with each desperate breath. It was 1875 in Buffalo, Wyoming, and the young schoolteacher had made the fatal mistake of returning for the children's readers after everyone had evacuated. The wooden beams crashed behind her as she burst through the doorway, her body rolling onto the hard, packed dirt of the schoolyard. The searing pain came later, after the shock wore off and the town doctor shook his head solemnly over the angry red wounds that marred her arms, back, and the left side of her face. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Norwood," Dr. Wells said, applying salve to her burns. "But I'm afraid these will leave scars." Zelda turned her face away, tears sliding down her unmarked cheek. At 22, she had come west with dreams of independence and adventure. The daughter of Boston intellectuals, she defied her parents' wishes that she marry a suitable young man from their social circle, instead answering an advertisement for a schoolteacher in Wyoming territory. For 9 months, she had thrived in Buffalo, winning over skeptical parents and their wild-eyed children with her enthusiasm and gentle determination. Now, as she lay in Mrs. Crawford's spare bedroom, where the widow had insisted she recover, Zelda wondered if her Western adventure was over before it had truly begun. The pain was constant, a reminder of her foolishness in running back into the flames. Worse was the knowledge that when she healed enough to look in a mirror, she wouldn't recognize her own reflection. "You've got a visitor," Mrs. Crawford announced 3 days later, her voice oddly cheerful. "The young Irons boy Yancy, is it? Says he's brought something for your recovery." Zelda's heart sank. She'd heard the whispers, the gasps when the bandages were changed. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, least of all Yancy Irons. The young cattle rancher had always tipped his hat to her when they passed on Buffalo's Main Street, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made her stomach flutter traitorously. "Please tell him I'm indisposed," Zelda said, pulling the blanket higher. "Mrs. Crawford clicked her tongue. "Nonsense. The man rode 5 miles with fresh broth from his mother's kitchen. The least you can do is thank him properly." Before Zelda could protest further, the door opened and Yancy Irons ducked into the room, his tall frame making the modest bedroom seem suddenly smaller. He held his hat in his hands, twisting the brim nervously as his eyes adjusted to the dim light. "Miss Norwood," he said softly. "I hope I'm not intruding." Zelda turned her face to the wall where the unmarked side of her face would be all he could see. "Mr. Irons, your concern is appreciated but unnecessary." He stepped closer, setting a covered pot on the bedside table. "My mother sends her regards. She says chicken broth can cure just about anything." "I doubt it can cure ugliness," Zelda said bitterly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Silence fell between them, and she wished desperately that he would leave. Instead, she felt the mattress dip as he sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "Miss Norwood, Zelda," he said, his voice low and serious. "Would you look at me, please? I'd rather not subject you to the sight. I've seen burns before. My pa was caught in a barn fire when I was 12. His hands were never the same, but he was still the strongest man I ever knew." Reluctantly, Zelda turned, bracing herself for the disgust that would surely cross his handsome features. Instead, his expression remained steady, his eyes meeting hers without flinching. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her bandaged arm. Something in his calm demeanor gave her courage. She nodded once, extending her arm where the bandages had been removed that morning, revealing the patchwork of angry red skin beneath. Yancy Irons touched her gently, his calloused fingers tracing the edge of a burn that ran from her wrist to her elbow. "These make you stronger, not weaker," he said, his voice filled with certainty. "Every scar tells a story of survival." Tears welled in Zelda's eyes. "My story is one of foolishness. I should have left the books." "Your story," he corrected, "is one of courage. The whole town's talking about how you made sure every child was safe before thinking of yourself." Zelda hadn't considered it that way. In the pain and shock of the aftermath, she'd forgotten her initial purpose, ensuring all her students had escaped. The books had been secondary. "The schoolhouse can be rebuilt," Yancy continued, "and when it is, those children will need their teacher back." "I don't know if I can face them looking like this," she admitted. "Children can be cruelly honest." Yancy's lips quirked into a small smile. "Miss Norwood, those children admire you more now than ever." Little Sarah Miller told her ma she wants to grow up to be as brave as her teacher. Despite herself, Zelda felt a warmth that had nothing to do with her injuries. Did she really? She did. And she's not the only one who thinks you're something special. His cheeks colored slightly and he stood abruptly, replacing his hat. "I should let you rest. May I call again tomorrow?" Zelda found herself nodding before she'd fully considered her answer. "I'd like that, Mr. Irons." "Yancy," he corrected. "If we're to be friends, you might as well use my Christian name." "Yancy," she repeated, testing the feel of it on her tongue. "Until tomorrow, then." After he'd gone, Zelda reached for the small hand mirror Mrs. Crawford had hidden in the drawer at her insistence. With trembling fingers, she turned it to catch her reflection. The left side of her face was a landscape of red and pink, already forming the ridges and valleys that would become permanent scars. She traced them lightly, wincing at the tenderness. "Stronger, not weaker," she whispered to herself. And for the first time since the fire, she began to believe it might be true. Yancy Irons returned the next day, and the next, each visit bringing not only his mother's healing broths but also news from town. The community was already raising funds to rebuild the schoolhouse. The children were continuing their lessons in the church for the time being, with the pastor's wife, who had once been a teacher in St. Louis, standing in until Zelda recovered. "They're holding your position," Yancy told her 2 weeks after the fire, as he helped her walk the length of Mrs. Crawford's garden. Zelda's burns were healing, though the pain remained, especially when she stretched her arms or turned her head too quickly. The school board voted unanimously. "That's very kind of them," Zelda said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "But I wonder if it's the right decision. Perhaps they should seek a permanent replacement." Yancy stopped, turning to face her. In the bright afternoon sunlight, her scars were fully visible, the bandages now reduced to just a few patches where the burns had been deepest. He studied her face without hesitation or pity. "Is that what you want?" he asked. "To leave Buffalo?" She hadn't allowed herself to consider what she truly wanted, focusing instead on simply enduring each day. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came west for adventure, for independence. I never imagined that your adventure would include surviving a fire," he finished when she trailed off. "Zelda, do you know what my father said about his burns?" She shook her head. "He said they reminded him daily of what matters most. Not how things look, but how they are. He could still hold a rope, still ride a horse, still embrace his children. The rest was just details." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Zelda said softly. "The wisest I've known. He'd tell you that running from your scars won't heal them any faster." She looked away, her gaze falling on Mrs. Crawford's rose bushes. "It's not just the scars, Yancy, it's everything. I came here to prove I could make my own way, that I didn't need my parents' Boston society to define me. Now I wonder if they were right all along. Perhaps I was foolish to think I belonged out here." Yancy was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "The West tests everyone who comes here. Some fold at the first sign of trouble, others endure. The strongest learn to thrive despite the challenges or perhaps because of them." He offered his arm again. "Which will you be, Miss Norwood?" The question hung between them as they completed their circuit of the garden. By the time they returned to the house, Zelda had made her decision. "I'll return to my teaching position as soon as Dr. Wells gives his permission," she told Yancy, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "The children deserve consistency, and I didn't come all this way to surrender at the first setback." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise on the plains. "I never doubted it for a moment." The rebuilding of the Buffalo schoolhouse progressed rapidly through May and into June. Yancy often rode into town after finishing his ranch work to help with construction, returning to Mrs. Crawford's with sawdust in his hair and paint on his hands to report on the day's progress to Zelda. By the time she was well enough to venture into town herself, the new schoolhouse was taking shape larger than before, with tall windows to let in light and a proper bell tower. On her first visit to the construction site, the workers stopped their hammering to remove their hats and offer their respects. Some couldn't hide their initial shock at the sight of her scars, now healing into a patchwork of pink and white that Dr. Wells assured her would fade somewhat with time, though they would never disappear completely. Miss Norwood. Several of her students spotted her from where they were watching the construction, running over with excitement that overcame any hesitation they might have felt about her altered appearance. "We missed you so much. Mrs. Peterson doesn't know the multiplication tables past 12. Are you coming back to teach us?" Their enthusiasm washed over her like a healing balm. Sarah Miller, the 7-year-old Yancy had mentioned, slipped her small hand into Zelda's scarred one without hesitation. "Tommy Briggs said you look scary now, but I told him that's nonsense," the little girl announced. "You're still the prettiest teacher in all of Wyoming territory." Zelda knelt to the child's level, her throat tight with emotion. "That's very kind of you to say, Sarah." "It's not kind, it's true," Sarah insisted with the absolute certainty of childhood. "And Mama says you're the bravest person she knows, on account of how you made sure we all got out before the roof fell in." From across the construction site, Zelda caught Yancy's eye. He was helping to raise a wall, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms bronzed by the sun. He tipped his head in acknowledgement, a small smile playing at his lips as if to say, "See, I told you so." That evening, Yancy escorted her back to Mrs. Crawford's house, taking a route that led them past the small creek that ran along the edge of town. "The children seem eager for your return," he observed, helping her navigate a rocky section of the path. Though her burns had largely healed, she still moved with care, learning the new limitations of her scarred skin. "They're resilient," Zelda said, "more accepting than I expected. Children often see more clearly than adults. They recognize what's important." They stopped by the creek, where the setting sun painted the water with streaks of gold and crimson. In the weeks since the fire, their relationship had evolved from formal acquaintances to something Zelda hesitated to name. Friendship, certainly, but there were moments like now, with his hand still supporting her elbow though the rough terrain was behind them, when she sensed something more. "My father has invited me to dinner on Sunday," Yancy said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "He's expressed an interest in meeting the teacher I've spoken of so frequently." Zelda felt her pulse quicken. "You've spoken of me to your father and my mother." "And my brothers." He looked sheepish. "I'm afraid you've become a regular topic at the Irons' dinner table." "I'm not sure I'm ready for such scrutiny," she admitted, her hand unconsciously rising to touch the scars on her cheek. Yancy caught her fingers gently, lowering her hand. "My family will see what I see," he said quietly. "A remarkable woman whose courage matches her intelligence. The rest is just details, remember." His confidence bolstered her own. "Then I'd be honored to accept your father's invitation." The Irons Ranch lay 5 miles outside of Buffalo, a sprawling operation that had grown from a modest homestead to one of the most successful cattle ranches in Johnson County. As Yancy drove the buggy through the main gate, Zelda took in the tidy fences, the sturdy barn, and the handsome 2-story house that spoke of prosperity earned through hard work. "It's beautiful," she said, admiring the way the ranch nestled against the backdrop of rolling hills. "It's home," Yancy replied simply. "My grandfather staked the initial claim in '51. My father expanded it after the war, and now my brothers and I help run it." He hesitated. "I hope to take over the north section one day, build my own house there." Before Zelda could respond, the front door of the main house opened, and an older couple emerged, the elder Irons, she presumed. Mrs. Irons was a stout woman with Yancy's blue eyes, while Mr. Irons stood tall and straight despite the years evident in his weathered face. "Welcome to the Triple I," Mr. Irons called as Yancy helped Zelda down from the buggy. His gaze met hers directly, without dwelling on her scars, and she immediately understood where Yancy had learned his forthright manner. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Irons," Zelda replied, extending her hand. His grip was firm, and as their hands clasped, she noticed the scars Yancy had described: pale, twisted skin that covered both his palms and disappeared up his sleeves. "The pleasure is ours, Miss Norwood. My son speaks very highly of Buffalo's schoolteacher." Mrs. Irons embraced her warmly. Come in, come in. Dinner's nearly ready, and the boys are already at the table, no doubt plotting to devour everything before we join them." Inside, Zelda was introduced to Yancy's three brothers: Jackson, the eldest, who managed the ranch alongside his father; Matthew, who handled the business affairs; and Caleb, the youngest at 19, still learning all aspects of ranching while harboring dreams of attending university back east. "Miss Norwood knows about universities," Yancy said as they settled around the large dining table. "Her father is a professor at Harvard." All eyes turned to Zelda with new interest. "Is that so?" Jackson asked. "What does he teach?" "Literature," Zelda replied. "He specializes in Shakespeare and the Romantic poets." "And you chose to teach arithmetic to Wyoming farm children instead of attending literary salons in Boston." Matthew seemed genuinely puzzled. "That's quite a departure." "I wanted to make a meaningful difference," Zelda explained. "In Boston, I would have been one of many educated young women vying for the same limited opportunities. Here, I can help shape the future of children who might otherwise have little access to education." "A noble pursuit," Mr. Irons nodded approvingly. "This country was built by people willing to step beyond the expected path." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, touching on ranch business, local politics, and the progress of the new schoolhouse. Throughout the meal, Zelda noticed the way Mr. Irons used his scarred hands without self-consciousness, whether passing dishes or gesturing to emphasize a point. It reminded her of what Yancy had said: the scars were just details, not defining characteristics. After dinner, while Mrs. Irons and the younger brothers cleared the table, Mr. Irons invited Zelda to join him on the porch. Yancy gave her a reassuring nod as she followed his father outside. The evening air was cool, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine from the nearby hills. Mr. Irons lit his pipe, the smoke curling upward in the fading light. "My son thinks very highly of you," he said without preamble. Zelda felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been exceptionally kind during my recovery." "Kindness is in his nature," Mr. Irons agreed. "But there's more to it than that." He held his scarred hands out before him, studying them in the twilight. "When I was caught in that fire, I thought my life as I knew it was over. I couldn't imagine how I'd run a ranch with hands that could barely grip a cup, let alone a rope." Zelda listened intently, sensing that this was a story he didn't share often. "My wife never flinched," he continued. "Not when she saw the burns, not when the doctor said I might lose my hands altogether, not during the long months of healing. She said something I've never forgotten: 'Thomas Irons, you're the same man you were yesterday. These scars just show the world what I already knew, that you're strong enough to survive what would break others.'" He turned to face Zelda directly. Yancy was just a boy then, but he watched and learned. He saw how his mother treated me no differently, how she expected the same of me as before. It shaped him into the man he is today. "A good man," Zelda said softly, "the best of my sons, though don't tell the others I said so." He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Miss Norwood, I don't presume to know the nature of your relationship with my son, but I want you to understand something. In this family, we value strength of character above all else. Your scars would never be an obstacle here." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes, touched by the simple acceptance in his words. "Thank you, Mr. Irons." Before he could respond, the door opened and Yancy stepped onto the porch. "Mother's serving apple pie," he announced. "She sent me to rescue Miss Norwood before you talk her ear off with your old stories." Mr. Irons chuckled. "Just sharing some wisdom, boy, something you could use more of." Yancy offered his arm to Zelda. "Has he thoroughly embarrassed me yet?" "On the contrary," she replied, accepting his arm. "Your father has given me much to think about." Later, as Yancy drove her back to town under a sky brilliant with stars, Zelda found herself stealing glances at his profile. In the moonlight, his features were cast in silver and shadow, strong and certain. "Your family is wonderful," she said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "They liked you," Yancy replied. "Even Jackson, and he's suspicious of anyone who uses words longer than 2 syllables." She laughed, the sound surprising her with its ease. When was the last time she had laughed so freely? Before the fire, certainly. "I liked them too, especially your father. He's very perceptive." Yancy's hands tightened slightly on the reins. "What did he say to you on the porch?" "He told me about your mother's response to his injuries. How she expected him to continue as before, scars and all." "That sounds like Mother. She doesn't tolerate self-pity, not even from herself." "He also said—" Zelda hesitated, suddenly shy. "He suggested that my scars wouldn't be an obstacle in your family." The buggy slowed as Yancy turned to look at her directly. "They wouldn't be," he said, his voice low and certain. "Not to any of us, and especially not to me." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. For weeks, they had danced around the growing attachment between them, neither acknowledging it directly. Now, with the vast Wyoming sky above them and the honest conversation with his father still resonating, the moment for truth had arrived. "Yancy," she began carefully, "I've valued your friendship these past weeks more than I can express, but I need to be certain that your kindness isn't born of pity." He pulled the buggy to a stop, setting the brake before turning fully toward her. "Zelda Norwood, there are many things I feel for you, but pity has never been among them. Admiration, yes, respect, absolutely, and something else that grows stronger each day we spend together." Her heart pounded against her ribs. "And what is that something else?" Instead of answering with words, Yancy leaned forward slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. When she remained still, he pressed his lips gently to hers in a kiss as light as a whisper. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Zelda. Not despite your scars, but including them. They're part of you now, just as my father's burns are part of him. But they don't define you any more than your intelligence, your courage, or your kindness define you completely. They're just threads in the tapestry." Tears filled her eyes, but for once they weren't tears of grief or self-pity. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. "But I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of disappointing you. Of not being the woman you deserve. Of waking up one day to find you've grown tired of the stares and whispers that will follow us." Yancy took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "Do you know what my father told me once? He said that love isn't something that happens to you, it's a choice you make every day. I choose you, Zelda. Today and tomorrow and all the days after, I choose you." He sealed his declaration with another kiss, this one deeper than the first. Zelda felt something unlock within her chest, a door long closed swinging open to let in light and air and possibility. By the time they reached Mrs. Crawford's house, a plan had formed between them. Yancy would court her properly, with Mrs. Crawford serving as chaperone on their outings. When the new schoolhouse was completed and Zelda resumed her teaching duties, they would see how their relationship progressed in the public eye of Buffalo society. "And if the townspeople stare?" Zelda asked as he helped her down from the buggy. "Let them," Yancy replied with a shrug. "People will always find something to talk about. Better it be something as fine as us walking out together than some real scandal." His casual confidence bolstered her own. "Until Wednesday, then?" "Wednesday," he confirmed, tipping his hat before climbing back into the buggy. "I'll bring a picnic. We can eat by the creek if the weather holds." Zelda watched him drive away, her heart lighter than it had been since before the fire. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond her recovery, a future that included not just returning to her teaching position, but perhaps someday creating a home with Yancy Irons. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of healing and renewal. The new schoolhouse was completed ahead of schedule, thanks in part to Yancy organizing additional volunteers from among the ranching families outside town. When Zelda walked through the finished building for the first time, she was overwhelmed by the care evident in every detail, from the sturdy shelves for books to the new slate boards mounted at the perfect height for writing. The town council approved extra funds for proper fire safety measures, Yancy explained as he showed her the metal buckets filled with sand stationed strategically around the room. And look here, he pointed to a large bell mounted near the door. This is to be rung in case of emergency. It's loud enough to be heard all the way to the sheriff's office. Zelda ran her fingers along the smooth wood of her new desk. It's perfect, better than the original in every way. That seems to be the pattern around here, he said, his gaze fixed on her face. Things that survive fire emerge stronger. His reference to her own recovery wasn't lost on her. In the 2 months since the fire, her burns had healed into permanent scars, but the pain had largely subsided. Dr. Wells declared her fully recovered, though he recommended a salve to keep the scarred skin from becoming too dry and tight. Zelda had begun venturing into town more frequently, enduring the initial stares and whispers with a dignity that gradually earned her renewed respect from the townspeople. The children, as Yancy had predicted, accepted her changed appearance with remarkable ease. When school resumed in the new building, not one student commented on her scars, though she caught some of the younger ones staring curiously during the first few days. Through it all, Yancy remained steadfast in his courtship. 3 times a week, he would arrive at Mrs. Crawford's house after school hours, sometimes with flowers picked from the wild meadows, other times with a book he thought she might enjoy. They walked together through town, rode in his buggy to picnic spots along the creek, and attended Sunday services at the small church where the town's Protestants worshipped regardless of denomination. The first time they appeared together at a community gathering, the midsummer dance held in the town square, Zelda felt every eye upon them as Yancy led her confidently into the first waltz. Her palms dampened with nervousness, but his steady hand at her waist and the warm approval in his eyes helped her navigate the scrutiny. "People are staring," she murmured as they turned around the makeshift dance floor. "Of course they are," he replied easily. "You're the most beautiful woman here. Yancy, please be serious. I am entirely serious." He guided her through a turn, his movements surprisingly graceful for a man who spent most of his days on horseback. "Besides, they're just jealous that I secured the first dance with the town's most eligible schoolteacher." His light-hearted response made her laugh, drawing even more attention. But as the evening progressed, Zelda realized that not all the glances were pitying or curious. Some were genuinely approving, particularly from the older women who had welcomed her initially when she arrived in Buffalo. "You two make a fine couple," Mrs. Peterson, the pastor's wife, commented during a break between dances. "Yancy Irons has never looked happier." "Thank you," Zelda replied, surprised by the simple acceptance. "He's been very kind." Mrs. Peterson shook her head. "It's not kindness, my dear. That young man is smitten, plain as day. Mark my words, we'll be hearing wedding bells before Christmas." The prediction left Zelda flustered but secretly pleased. Though they had never discussed marriage explicitly, the trajectory of their courtship seemed clear to both of them. Still, hearing it stated so baldly by one of the town's most respected matrons gave their relationship a new legitimacy in her mind. As summer yielded to the crisp days of early autumn, Zelda found herself more integrated into Buffalo society than ever before. The initial curiosity about her scars had faded into acceptance, and her position as the town's teacher gave her a natural authority that transcended appearance. Meanwhile, her relationship with Yancy deepened with each passing week. On a golden afternoon in late September, Yancy suggested they ride to his father's ranch for dinner. "There's something I want to show you before we eat," he said mysteriously as they set out from town. Instead of taking the main road to the ranch house, Yancy guided their horses along a less traveled path that wound through stands of aspen trees, their leaves just beginning to turn the vibrant gold that gave them their name. After about 20 minutes, they emerged onto a small ridge overlooking a picturesque valley. In the center of the valley stood a half-built cabin, its log walls rising solidly from a stone foundation, the roof not yet in place. "What do you think?" Yancy asked, a note of nervousness in his voice that she rarely heard. "It's lovely," Zelda replied honestly. "Who's building it?" "I am, with some help from my brothers." He urged his horse forward, leading them down the gentle slope toward the structure. "This is the northern section of the ranch I told you about. My father deeded it to me on my 25th birthday last month." Zelda's heart quickened as she began to understand the significance. "You're building your own home." "I'm trying to," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Though Jackson says my carpentry skills leave much to be desired." They dismounted near the cabin, and Yancy tied their horses to a nearby hitching post, a sign that this was no temporary construction site, but a place he visited regularly. He led her inside through the doorway, which still lacked a proper door. The interior was simple but thoughtfully designed, with a large main room that would serve as both kitchen and living area, and two smaller rooms off to one side. Large windows, currently just openings in the walls, were positioned to capture both morning and afternoon light. "The glass for the windows should arrive on next month's supply wagon," Yancy explained, "and I've ordered proper doors from the carpenter in Sheridan. The roof trusses are ready to go up next week." Zelda walked slowly through the space, imagining it completed, furnished with a sturdy table, comfortable chairs, shelves lined with books. A home. "It's wonderful, Yancy. You've done remarkable work." He stood in the center of the main room, suddenly looking less confident than she'd ever seen him. "I was hoping. That is, I'd planned. This isn't how I meant to do this." Zelda stopped her explorations, turning to face him fully. "Do what?" Taking a deep breath, Yancy crossed to where she stood, taking both her hands in his. "Zelda Norwood, I built this cabin with you in mind. Every window placed where I thought you might enjoy the view, every room designed to be comfortable for two people building a life together." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small ring. "I'm asking you to marry me, to make this house a home with me." The simple gold band gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the unfinished window. "It was my grandmother's," he explained when she didn't immediately respond. "Not fancy, I know, but it's perfect," Zelda interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Absolutely perfect," hope lit his features. "Is that a yes?" Instead of answering, she threw her arms around his neck, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she laughed joyfully. "Yes, Yancy Irons. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if made for her. "I love you, Zelda. Every part of you." As they stood in the half-built cabin that would become their home, Zelda realized how far she had come from that terrible day in May. The fire had changed her, marked her permanently, but it hadn't destroyed her. Instead, through pain and recovery, she had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed and found a love she never expected. "I love you too," she whispered against his chest as he held her close. "Thank you for showing me that these scars make me stronger, not weaker." His answer was another kiss, sealing their promise to build a life together. News of their engagement spread quickly through Buffalo. Mrs. Crawford was the first to offer congratulations, followed by a steady stream of well-wishers, parents of Zelda's students, shopkeepers who had come to know her through her regular visits, even the gruff sheriff who simply tipped his hat and said, "Irons is a lucky man." The town's reaction confirmed what Zelda had gradually come to accept. Her burns had ceased to be her defining characteristic in the eyes of the community. She was Miss Norwood, the schoolteacher, first, the woman engaged to Yancy Irons second, and a burn survivor third if mentioned at all. With the school term well underway and Yancy determined to complete the cabin before winter set in, they set their wedding date for December 23rd, just before Christmas. "A fine time for a wedding," Pastor Peterson declared. "The church will already be decorated with evergreens and candles." Zelda wrote to her parents in Boston, expecting resistance or at least concern about her hasty engagement to a Wyoming cattle rancher they had never met. To her surprise, their reply was cautiously supportive. "Your father and I have discussed your letter at length," her mother wrote. "While we naturally have reservations about your marrying someone so far removed from our circle, we cannot deny that your letters since the fire have reflected a growing contentment that was absent in your earlier correspondence. If this young man has helped restore your spirits after such a tragedy, perhaps he possesses qualities we would admire. We have decided to make the journey to Wyoming for your wedding, to meet this Mr. Irons and see for ourselves the life you are choosing." The prospect of her refined Boston parents encountering the rugged reality of frontier life initially filled Zelda with trepidation. But as she shared the letter with Yancy that evening as they sat on Mrs. Crawford's porch, his reaction reassured her. "I look forward to meeting them," he said sincerely. "They raised a remarkable daughter. There must be much to admire in them as well. They may not approve of you," she warned. "My father especially had hopes of my marrying someone from academic circles." Yancy considered this. "Then I'll have to show him that ranchers read books too." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "Perhaps I'll memorize some Shakespeare before they arrive." The mental image of Yancy quoting sonnets to her scholarly father made Zelda laugh. "Just be yourself. That's who I'm marrying after all." As autumn deepened toward winter, preparations for both the wedding and their new home accelerated. Zelda continued teaching during the week, while spending Saturdays helping Yancy with the cabin. Though her skills with hammer and saw were limited, she could hold boards in place, apply stain to the finished walls, and make decisions about the placement of furniture they were gradually acquiring. By early December, the cabin was nearly complete. The roof was on, the windows glazed, the doors hung properly on their hinges. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, promising warmth during the harsh Wyoming winters. Yancy had built sturdy shelves for Zelda's books and a desk where she could prepare her lessons. Together, they'd selected a bed frame from the furniture maker in Sheridan, and Mrs. Irons had pieced together a wedding quilt in a pattern she called Log Cabin, a nod to their new home. "It's tradition," the older woman explained as she showed Zelda the nearly completed quilt, its geometric design created from scraps of blue, green, and cream fabrics. "Every bride should have a new quilt to start her married life." The simple acceptance and practical kindness of Yancy's family continued to touch Zelda deeply. Where her own parents might have sent expensive silver or fine china as wedding gifts, the Irons family offered things that would make their life together comfortable and functional: a set of cast iron cookware, hand-carved wooden spoons, a rocking chair built by Jackson that would sit beside the fireplace. 2 weeks before the wedding, a telegram arrived from Boston announcing that Zelda's parents would arrive on the 21st, traveling on the newly completed railroad line as far as Cheyenne, then by stagecoach to Buffalo. Yancy immediately offered to meet them in Cheyenne, but Zelda gently declined. "I think it's better if I go," she said. "The stagecoach journey can be challenging for Easterners. I'll prepare them along the way for everything." By everything, they both knew she meant not just the frontier conditions of Buffalo, but also her scars. Though she described her injuries in letters home, seeing them in person would be different. Better that her parents have that moment of adjustment privately, with only their daughter to witness it. The journey to Cheyenne was long, but gave Zelda time to gather her thoughts. As the train pulled into the station, she spotted her parents, immediately her father tall and distinguished in his black coat and hat, her mother elegant, despite the dust of travel, in her navy blue traveling suit. They looked out of place among the cowboys, miners, and frontier families crowding the platform. "Mother, father," Zelda called, waving to catch their attention. Her mother turned, scanning the crowd before her eyes settled on Zelda. There was a moment brief but unmistakable when shock registered on her features. Then, composing herself, Elizabeth Norwood hurried forward, arms outstretched. "My darling girl," she said, embracing Zelda tightly. "How wonderful to see you." Zelda's father joined them, his scholarly face grave as he took in his daughter's appearance. "Zelda," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He touched her scarred cheek gently. "My brave girl." The simple acknowledgement brought tears to Zelda's eyes. "I've missed you both," she said, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of seeing her parents after nearly 2 years of separation. "We've missed you too," her mother replied, linking arms with her as they moved away from the crowded platform. "Now, tell us everything about this rancher who has captured your heart." The stagecoach journey to Buffalo provided ample time for conversation. Zelda found herself describing not just Yancy and his family, but the entire community that had embraced her before and after the fire. She told them about her students, about the rebuilding of the schoolhouse, about the cabin Yancy had constructed with his own hands. "He sounds very capable," her father said, clearly trying to find positive attributes in a man so different from what he had envisioned for his daughter. "He's more than capable, father. He's kind and intelligent and stronger than anyone I've ever known." Zelda hesitated before adding, "He saw beyond my scars from the beginning when I couldn't see past them myself." Her mother reached across to squeeze her hand. "Then he is a man of perception and character, regardless of his education or background." The stagecoach rolled into Buffalo late on the afternoon of the 22nd, the day before the wedding. Yancy was waiting for them, standing tall beside his wagon, freshly shaved and wearing his best shirt and vest. As he helped Zelda's parents down from the coach, she saw him through their eyes, a frontier rancher with calloused hands and sun-weathered skin, so different from the refined academics who populated their Boston social circle. But she also saw the way he looked at her with love that transcended appearance and knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. "Mr. and Mrs. Norwood," Yancy said, extending his hand to Zelda's father. "Welcome to Buffalo. I'm honored to finally meet you." Professor James Norwood clasped the offered hand, his academic's eyes assessing the young man before him. "Mr. Irons, my daughter speaks very highly of you." "As I do of her, sir. Your daughter is the finest person I've ever known." The simple sincerity in his voice seemed to register with both Norwoods. Zelda's mother softened visibly, while her father nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "We've arranged for you to stay with Mrs. Crawford," Zelda explained as Yancy loaded their trunks into the wagon. "She has the most comfortable guest room in town, and she's been kind enough to host me these past months." "We look forward to thanking her," Elizabeth Norwood said, "and to seeing this school where you teach and the cabin you've described so enthusiastically in your letters." Yancy helped the women into the wagon before climbing up himself. "If you're not too tired from your journey, Professor Mrs. Norwood, I'd be pleased to show you our home tomorrow morning before the wedding. It's mostly finished now, lacking only the final touches Zelda will add after we're married." The pride in his voice when he said "our home" warmed Zelda's heart. Whatever doubts her parents might harbor about her choice, she had none. The evening passed pleasantly enough, with Mrs. Crawford serving an elaborate dinner in honor of the visitors from Boston. Pastor and Mrs. Peterson joined them, along with Dr. Wells and his wife, providing a small sampling of Buffalo society that helped put the Norwoods at ease. Conversation flowed from local events to national politics to literature, revealing that while Yancy might not have had a formal education beyond the basics, he was well-read and thoughtful. "Thoreau is one of my favorites," he admitted when Professor Norwood mentioned the Transcendentalists. "His ideas about self-reliance and living deliberately speak to the realities of frontier life." Zelda's father looked surprised but pleased. "Indeed, though I wonder if Thoreau's experiment at Walden Pond would have lasted through a Wyoming winter." "Doubtful," Yancy laughed. "But his principles hold true, regardless. A man should build his own house, grow his own food when possible, and find meaning in his labor rather than endless acquisition." As they discussed Thoreau's philosophy, Zelda noticed her mother watching Yancy with growing approval. Later, when the women had withdrawn to the parlor while the men enjoyed cigars in Mr. Crawford's study, Elizabeth Norwood took her daughter's hand. "He's not what we expected," she said quietly, "but I begin to see why you chose him." The next morning, Yancy arrived early to take the Norwoods to see the cabin. Zelda remained behind with Mrs. Crawford and several other women from town who had come to help her prepare for the wedding. "I should go with you," she protested, as her parents prepared to leave with Yancy. "What if they have questions about the furnishings, or it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride on the wedding day?" Mrs. Peterson reminded her, shooing the Norwoods and Yancy out the door. "Besides, we have much to do to make you the most beautiful bride Buffalo has ever seen." The hours passed in a flurry of preparation. Zelda bathed in water scented with lavender, washed her hair, and allowed Mrs. Crawford to style it in an elegant arrangement of curls and braids, adorned with small white flowers from the town's only greenhouse. Her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk that her mother had brought from Boston, was carefully pressed. As the women helped her dress, Zelda caught glimpses of herself in Mrs. Crawford's mirror. The scars were still visible, of course, but they seemed less prominent today, softened perhaps by her happiness or by the gentle application of powder Mrs. Peterson had insisted upon. "There," Mrs. Crawford said, adjusting the final fold of the dress. "A lovelier bride I've never seen." A knock at the door announced the return of Zelda's parents. Her father entered first, his eyes widening at the sight of his daughter in her wedding finery. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional. "Truly beautiful." Her mother followed, carrying a small box. "We have something for you," she said. "A gift from both of us." Inside the box lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Elizabeth Norwood opened it to reveal tiny portraits, one of herself and one of Zelda's father. "So we'll always be with you, even when we return to Boston." Tears threatened to ruin Mrs. Peterson's careful work with the powder. "Thank you," Zelda whispered as her mother fastened the locket around her neck. "Your young man showed us the cabin," her father said, changing the subject before emotions could overwhelm them all. "It's a sound structure, well built and thoughtfully designed. He's clearly put his heart into it." "And he speaks of you with such devotion," her mother added. "We had our doubts, I won't deny it, but seeing the life you're building here, the respect you've earned from this community." She touched Zelda's scarred cheek lightly. "We're proud of you, darling, and we believe you've chosen well." Their approval, so unexpected yet deeply desired, was the perfect wedding gift. Zelda embraced her parents, careful not to crush her dress or disturb her carefully arranged hair. "I love you both. Thank you for coming all this way." Another knock interrupted them. "It's time," Mrs. Crawford announced. "The church is full, and Pastor Peterson sent word that the groom is getting anxious." The small church at the end of Buffalo's Main Street was indeed packed to capacity. As Zelda entered on her father's arm, she saw familiar faces from every corner of her Wyoming life, her students and their families, shopkeepers and ranchers. The Irons family seated prominently in the front pew. And standing before the altar, Yancy waited, his eyes fixed on her with such love that everything else seemed to fade away. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotions and promises. Zelda recalled saying her vows in a clear voice that surprised her with its steadiness, remembered the warm pressure of Yancy's hand as he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, felt the gentle touch of his lips as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Yancy Irons," Pastor Peterson announced, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration continued at the town hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for both Christmas and the wedding. There was food enough for twice their number, music provided by local fiddlers, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Zelda found herself passed from partner to partner her father, Yancy's brothers, even gruff old Sheriff Taylor who claimed it was his official duty to dance with the bride. But it was Yancy she sought between each dance, his familiar presence anchoring her amid the swirl of celebration. When at last the festivities began to wind down, he found her talking with her mother and Mrs. Irons, slipping his arm around her waist with the easy confidence of a man who knew his touch was welcome. "Ready to see our home, Mrs. Irons?" he asked, the new name sending a thrill through her. Home. Such a simple word for such a profound concept. Not Mrs. Crawford's spare bedroom, not her parents' Boston townhouse, but a place that belonged to her and Yancy alone. They said their goodbyes her parents would stay another week before returning east, long enough to celebrate Christmas and help Zelda settle into her new home, and climbed into Yancy's wagon for the short journey to their cabin. Though the night was cold, Yancy had tucked warm blankets around them, and the stars overhead seemed to light their way. "Happy?" he asked as they drove, his breath forming clouds in the frosty air. "Perfectly," Zelda replied, leaning against his shoulder. "My parents approve of you, you know." "So your mother informed me quite directly. She said if I ever gave you cause to regret your choice, she would travel from Boston personally to set me straight," Zelda laughed. "That sounds like Mother. She's never been one to mince words, a quality I admire, and one you've inherited, Mrs. Irons." The name still felt new, a gift she was just unwrapping. "I love you, Yancy, and I love you more than I have words to express." As they approached the cabin, Zelda gasped in surprise. Light spilled from the windows, casting a warm glow on the snow surrounding it. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. "Jackson rode ahead to light the fire," Yancy explained, "and Mother sent some things over earlier today." He helped her down from the wagon, then swept her into his arms before she could take a step toward the door. "Tradition," he said with a grin, carrying her across the threshold into their home. Inside, the cabin was transformed from the last time Zelda had seen it. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Fresh evergreen boughs decorated the mantel, filling the air with their clean, sharp scent. The furniture they had collected over the past weeks was arranged perfectly: the sturdy table with 4 chairs, the bookshelf already filled with Zelda's books, the comfortable sofa positioned to catch the fireplace's warmth, the rocking chair beside it. And everywhere small touches that spoke of careful preparation. Candles lit on the table, a vase of winter berries beside them, the wedding quilt folded neatly at the foot of their bed, visible through the open door to the bedroom. "It's perfect," Zelda breathed as Yancy set her down gently. "Absolutely perfect." He closed the door against the cold, then turned to face her, suddenly seeming almost shy. "Welcome home, Zelda." She went to him, sliding her arms around his neck, drawing his face down to hers for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. "Home," she agreed when they finally broke apart. "With you." Later, as they lay together beneath the wedding quilt, the fire burning low in the grate, Zelda traced the line of Yancy's jaw with her fingertip. In the firelight, his face was all planes and shadows, familiar yet still wonderful to behold. "What are you thinking?" he asked, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "That I never imagined I could be this happy." She hesitated, then added, "After the fire, I thought my life was over, at least the life I had planned. I couldn't see past the pain and the scars. And now?" Now I see that the fire was just one chapter in my story, an important one perhaps, but not the defining one. She smiled, thinking of the path that had led her to this moment. You were right, you know, these scars did make me stronger, not weaker. They taught me what truly matters. Yancy pulled her closer, his warmth enveloping her. And what is that, Mrs. Irons? Courage, kindness, love. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right above his heart. You. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the roof of their cabin with a blanket of white. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Zelda and Yancy Irons were warm, safe, and completely, perfectly home. Spring came early to Wyoming territory in 1876, bringing with it new life and fresh beginnings. The snow melted from the hills surrounding the Irons ranch, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the soil. Streams swelled with snowmelt, rushing down from the higher elevations to water the valleys. On the northern edge of the Triple I, Zelda and Yancy settled into the rhythms of married life. Weekdays found Zelda at the schoolhouse in Buffalo, guiding her growing number of students through lessons in reading, arithmetic, and history. She returned each afternoon to their cabin, where she might find Yancy working the nearby pastures or repairing fences damaged by winter storms. Evenings were spent together, Zelda preparing lessons for the next day or writing letters to her parents in Boston. Yancy reading aloud from one of the books that increasingly filled their shelves. Sometimes Jackson or Caleb would ride over with news from the main ranch, staying for dinner and filling the cabin with laughter and stories. You've changed, my brother, Jackson remarked to Zelda one evening as Yancy walked him to his horse. He used to be the serious one, always worrying about tomorrow. Now he smiles more than the rest of us combined. Zelda glanced toward her husband, noting the easy way he moved, the relaxed set of his shoulders. Marriage agrees with him, she said simply. Marriage to you agrees with him, Jackson corrected. You're good for each other, sister. The words warmed her, another confirmation that she had found her place in this family, in this community. The scars that had once seemed like a barrier to connection now rarely entered her thoughts. They were simply part of her, like her blue eyes or the slight accent that still betrayed her Boston origins. In late April, Zelda made an appointment with Dr. Wells, having suspected for several weeks that their family might soon be expanding. The doctor confirmed her suspicions with a broad smile. Congratulations, Mrs. Irons. I'd say you're about 2 months along. The baby should arrive around Thanksgiving if my calculations are correct. Zelda floated through the rest of her school day in a haze of joy and anticipation, barely able to focus on her students' recitations. When the final bell rang, she dismissed the children with uncharacteristic haste and hurried home, eager to share the news with Yancy. She found him in the small barn behind their cabin, grooming his favorite horse. At the sound of her approach, he looked up, his face breaking into a smile that still made her heart skip. You're home early, he observed, setting down the brush. Everything all right at school? Everything's wonderful, Zelda replied, unable to contain her news any longer. Especially now that I know why I've been so tired these past few weeks. Yancy's brow furrowed in concern. Are you unwell? Quite the opposite. She took his hands in hers, drawing him out of the barn into the spring sunshine. Dr. Wells says we're going to have a baby in November. For a moment, Yancy stood perfectly still, his expression frozen in surprise. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled the horses, he lifted Zelda off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her down with sudden care. A baby, he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. Our baby. His hand moved to rest gently on her still flat stomach. Are you happy? Deliriously, she assured him, covering his hand with her own. Though also a bit terrified, I know nothing about raising a child. Neither do I, Yancy admitted. But we'll learn together, just as we've learned everything else. He kissed her softly. You're going to be a wonderful mother, Zelda. That evening, they rode to the main ranch house to share their news with the elder Irons. Mrs. Irons immediately enfolded Zelda in a warm embrace. "The first grandchild," she exclaimed, tears of joy in her eyes. "Thomas, did you hear? Our Yancy is going to be a father." Mr. Irons clasped his son's shoulder with his scarred hand. "Congratulations, son, there's no greater blessing than a child." Jackson and Matthew offered their congratulations with handshakes and backslapping, while young Caleb seemed slightly bewildered by the idea of becoming an uncle at 19. "This calls for a celebration," Mrs. Irons declared. "Caleb, go fetch that bottle of Applejack your father's been saving. And Matthew, run to the root cellar for those preserves I put up last fall." As the family bustled about preparing an impromptu feast, Yancy drew Zelda aside. "Are you feeling well enough for all this excitement?" His concern touched her deeply. "I'm perfectly fine." "A little tired, perhaps, but otherwise well. We won't stay late," he promised, keeping his voice low. "And you must tell me if you need to rest at any time." "Yancy Irons, I am not made of glass," she chided gently. "Thousands of women have babies every day. I suspect I can manage to sit through one family dinner." His protective instincts continued throughout the spring and into summer as Zelda's condition became more visible. He insisted on hiring one of the younger Irons cousins to drive her to and from school once her pregnancy began to show, concerned about her walking the distance alone. At home, he took on more of the household tasks, despite Zelda's protests that she remained perfectly capable. "Let me do this for you," he said simply when she objected to his fussing. "You're carrying our child. The least I can do is carry the water from the well." As her body changed, Zelda found herself thinking more frequently of her scars, particularly when Yancy's hands moved lovingly over her expanding belly. The contrast between the smooth, taut skin there and the ridged landscape of her burns sometimes brought back echoes of her earlier insecurities. "What if the baby is frightened by my scars?" she asked one night as they lay in bed, the summer heat making sleep elusive. "Babies respond to faces, to expressions. What if our child recoils from me?" Yancy propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious in the moonlight filtering through their window. "Zelda, our baby will know your face as the source of love and comfort from the very beginning. Your scars will be as natural to our child as the color of your eyes or the sound of your voice." His certainty reassured her, as it always did. Yancy had a gift for cutting through her anxieties with simple, unassailable logic. The summer passed in a haze of heat and anticipation. Zelda continued teaching until early October, when Dr. Wells suggested she might benefit from rest before the baby's arrival. The school board hired a temporary replacement, a young woman newly arrived from Pennsylvania, with the understanding that Zelda would return after the baby was born if she chose to do so. "I haven't decided yet," she admitted to Yancy as they discussed the arrangement. "Part of me can't imagine giving up teaching, but another part can't bear the thought of leaving our baby with someone else all day." "You don't have to decide now," he reminded her. "Let's see how we feel once the little one is here." The little one, as they had taken to calling their unborn child, made his appearance on a cold, clear night in late November, 2 days after Thanksgiving. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Mrs. Irons and Dr. Wells attending. Yancy paced the main room of their cabin, periodically sticking his head into the bedroom to check on Zelda's progress until his mother firmly banished him. "Go chop wood or check the stock," she ordered. "You're making everyone nervous with your hovering." Finally, just after midnight, the first cry of their son echoed through the cabin. Dr. Wells opened the bedroom door, his face weary but triumphant. "Congratulations, Mr. Irons. You have a healthy son and your wife is doing well." Yancy nearly knocked the doctor over in his haste to enter the bedroom. There he found Zelda propped up against the pillows, her face flushed and damp with perspiration but radiant with joy. In her arms, wrapped in the soft blanket Mrs. Crawford had knitted, lay a tiny red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," Zelda said softly as Yancy approached the bed with reverent steps. Thomas James Irons, after both our fathers. Yancy sat carefully beside her, his eyes never leaving the small bundle. He's perfect, he whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek with one finger. Absolutely perfect. Little Thomas opened his eyes at his father's touch, revealing unfocused blue that would later darken to match Yancy's. He yawned, a tiny motion that completely captivated both his parents. "Would you like to hold him?" Zelda asked, carefully transferring the swaddled infant to Yancy's arms. The sight of her strong, capable husband cradling their newborn son with such tender care brought fresh tears to Zelda's eyes. This was what she had never dared to imagine in those dark days after the fire, a family of her own, a love that encompassed all of her, scars and all. "Welcome to the world, Thomas James," Yancy murmured to his son. "You have the most extraordinary mother any boy could ask for. And I promise you, both of us will love you more than you can possibly imagine." The first months of parenthood were a blur of exhaustion and wonder. Thomas proved to be a good-natured baby, though he seemed to believe that nighttime was for wakefulness rather than sleep. Zelda and Yancy took turns walking the floor with him during his fussy periods, each developing their own methods for soothing him back to slumber. Zelda discovered that Thomas quieted most quickly when she sang to him old lullabies she remembered from her own childhood, transformed by her untrained but gentle voice. Yancy found that their son responded to movement, so he would bundle the baby against his chest and walk slow circuits around the cabin, pointing out objects and describing them in a low, steady voice until Thomas's eyes grew heavy. As Yancy had predicted, the baby showed no reaction whatsoever to Zelda's scars. When she nursed him, his tiny hand would often rest against the marked skin of her chest or arm, neither avoiding nor fixating on the textured surface. To Thomas, his mother was simply his mother, the source of food and comfort, and the voice he turned toward instinctively. Winter settled over Wyoming with its customary ferocity, but inside their cabin, the Irons family created their own warmth. Visitors came regularly, the elder Irons to dote on their first grandchild, Mrs. Crawford bearing casseroles and advice, even some of Zelda's former students trudging through the snow to see the teacher's baby. "Will you come back to school, Miss nor Mrs. Irons?" 11-year-old Abigail Taylor asked during one such visit, watching in fascination as Zelda changed Thomas's diaper. "I'm not sure yet," Zelda replied honestly. "I miss teaching, but this little fellow keeps me quite busy." Abigail considered this seriously. "My ma says you're the best teacher Buffalo ever had. She says Miss Perkins is nice enough but doesn't explain things as well as you do." The comment stayed with Zelda long after Abigail had gone home. Teaching had been her purpose, her independence, her connection to the community even before her marriage. Could she find a way to maintain that part of herself while embracing motherhood? She discussed it with Yancy that evening as they sat before the fire, Thomas sleeping peacefully in the cradle Yancy's father had crafted for him. "I think I'd like to return to teaching next fall," she said carefully. "Not immediately, but once Thomas is a bit older." Yancy nodded thoughtfully. "I thought you might. You've never struck me as someone content to limit herself to just one role." His easy acceptance surprised her. "You wouldn't mind? Some men expect their wives to remain at home once children arrive." "Some men marry women who are content with that arrangement," Yancy countered. "I married you a woman who crossed half a continent to pursue her calling. I wouldn't expect that calling to disappear simply because you've become a mother." "But practical considerations remain," Zelda pointed out. "Who would care for Thomas while I'm at school? We'll find a solution," Yancy promised. "Perhaps one of my cousins could help, or we might build on a small addition to the schoolhouse where he could stay during teaching hours. We have time to figure it out before next fall." His willingness to consider unconventional arrangements rather than simply expecting Zelda to conform to traditional expectations reinforced what she had always known, that in Yancy Irons, she had found a partner who valued her completely, who saw her strength and intelligence as assets rather than challenges to his own position. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" she asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Not in the last few hours," he replied, pressing a kiss to her hair, "but I never tire of hearing it." Spring arrived again, bringing Thomas's first smile, his first rollover, his first attempts at crawling. Zelda watched in amazement as their son developed, each day bringing new discoveries. By summer, he was pulling himself up on furniture, babbling a language only he understood, and developing a distinct personality, curious, determined, and utterly charming. In August, as promised, Yancy added a small room to the schoolhouse where Thomas could stay during teaching hours. Mrs. Crawford, now retired from hosting boarders, agreed to watch him there, bringing her knitting and her boundless patience to the task of caring for an increasingly mobile infant. When school resumed in September, Zelda returned to her position with new perspective. Motherhood had deepened her understanding of her students, her patience with their struggles, her appreciation for the trust their parents placed in her. And at the end of each day, she had the joy of returning home with Thomas, watching Yancy's face light up as they approached the cabin. Their life settled into a new rhythm different from before, but no less satisfying. Zelda taught during the week while Yancy managed his section of the ranch. Weekends were family time, spent exploring the land around their home or visiting the elder Irons, who doted shamelessly on their grandson. The burn scars that had once dominated Zelda's consciousness faded in significance, becoming simply one aspect of her identity among many others. Teacher, wife, mother, friend. When she caught sight of her reflection now, she saw not the marks of tragedy but the evidence of survival, the physical reminder of the day that had ultimately led her to this life she cherished. On the second anniversary of their wedding, Zelda and Yancy left Thomas with his grandparents for the night and rode to the spot where he had proposed. The cabin that had then been half-built was now a proper home, with flower beds Zelda had planted along the front path and a small vegetable garden flourishing behind. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Irons," Yancy said, helping her dismount from her horse. "2 years of marriage and you haven't run screaming back to Boston yet," Zelda laughed, linking her arm through his as they walked toward their home. "Boston holds nothing for me now. Everything I love is here." Inside, Yancy had prepared a special dinner set on their table, which had been covered with their best tablecloth and decorated with wildflowers. Candles cast a warm glow over the scene. "When did you arrange all this?" Zelda asked in amazement. "I have my secrets," Yancy replied with a wink, "though I might have had some help from Mother this morning while you were packing Thomas's things." They sat down to eat, reminiscing about their wedding day, about Thomas's birth, about the countless small moments that had filled their first 2 years together. As Yancy poured the last of the wine into their glasses, he raised his in a toast. "To my beautiful wife," he said, his eyes reflecting the candlelight, "every day with you is a gift I never expected and certainly never deserved." "I think you have that backward," Zelda replied, touching her glass to his. "You were the one who saw beyond my scars when I couldn't see past them myself. You were the one who showed me that they made me stronger, not weaker." "I only spoke the truth," Yancy said simply. "Your strength was always there. The fire just revealed it like gold tested in flame." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Zelda traced the familiar planes of Yancy's face with gentle fingers. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. "A gift of sorts for our anniversary." His hand caught hers, bringing her fingers to his lips. "What is it?" "Dr. Wells confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have another baby in the spring." Yancy's breath caught. "Truly, Thomas will have a brother or sister." "Yes," Zelda confirmed, laughing softly at his evident joy. "Though this time I think I'll stop teaching a bit earlier." Thomas was nearly born at the schoolhouse, as you may recall. He gathered her close, his hand moving to rest over her stomach as it had when she'd told him about Thomas. "Another child," he marveled. Another piece of both of us, are you happy? She asked, echoing the question he'd asked her during her first pregnancy. Beyond words, he assured her. Our family is growing, our home is filled with love, and I have you by my side through all of it. What more could any man ask for? As Zelda drifted toward sleep in the circle of her husband's arms, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The fire that had marked her body had also, in its way, marked her path, leading her to discover strengths she hadn't known she possessed, opening her heart to a love that saw beyond surface appearances to the person within. Her scars had indeed made her stronger, not weaker. And in that strength, she had built a life more beautiful than anything she could have imagined on that terrible day when flames had threatened to define her future. Instead, she had defined it herself, with Yancy beside her every step of the way. Together, they faced whatever challenges arose, confident in the knowledge that they had already survived the worst and emerged stronger for it. And that, Zelda thought as sleep claimed her, was the greatest gift of all.